He swung through the air with graceful precision, 30 feet above the crowd below. To the audience, he was just another acrobat in a traveling circus. But the way he moved, the way he calculated angles and distances, the way his eyes constantly scanned for exits, that wasn't circus training. That was something else entirely. What you're about to witness will leave you speechless. Before we reveal what happened next, hit that subscribe button for... The morning had started like any other at Westfield Shopping Center in downtown Phoenix. Marcus Daniel Kane was setting up equipment for the spectacular circus's afternoon performance, checking each rope and harness with the meticulous attention to detail that had kept him alive through 3 combat deployments in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. He wore the same colorful costume that had become his uniform for the past 18 months. Bright blue and silver spandex with sequined accents that caught the morning light as he moved through his pre-performance routine. The spectacular circus was a small traveling outfit that performed at shopping malls, community centers, and county fairs across the American Southwest. It wasn't the glamorous big-top experience that most people associated with circus life. No elephants, no lion tamers, no 3-ring spectacle under canvas. Just a modest group of performers who brought wonder and excitement to everyday venues where families gathered to escape the routine of ordinary life. Marcus had joined the circus 18 months ago, shortly after his medical discharge from the United States Army. The official paperwork listed his reason for leaving as chronic back injury sustained during training exercise, resulting in permanent limitations incompatible with continued military service. The unofficial reality was far more complex and significantly more classified. Staff Sergeant Marcus Daniel Kane, formerly of the 75th Ranger Regiment, had been psychologically and emotionally shattered by 15 years of special operations missions that officially never happened, conducted in countries where American forces were never supposed to be operating. Marcus Daniel Kane was 38 years old and had served 15 years in the United States Army as a special operations soldier specializing in direct action, counterterrorism, and hostage rescue operations. He had conducted 47 classified missions across 6 different countries, participated in counterterrorism operations that prevented attacks on American soil, and had saved the lives of countless civilians and military personnel through skills that most people couldn't imagine existed outside of Hollywood movies. He had been awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action, 2 Bronze Stars with V device for valor, and a Purple Heart for wounds received in enemy action, though none of those decorations were displayed in any public record due to the classified nature of his service. But today, none of that mattered. Today, he was just another circus performer setting up for a Saturday afternoon show that would entertain children and help their parents forget about the stresses of everyday life for an hour or 2. The irony wasn't lost on him, and in quiet moments like this, Marcus often reflected on the strange path that had led him from the shadows of international special operations to the bright lights of family entertainment. For 15 years, he had moved through darkness, scaled impossible walls under enemy fire, and infiltrated terrorist strongholds using skills that circus acrobats spent decades mastering. Now he was using those same skills to entertain families in shopping malls, trading the life-or-death precision of military operations for the choreographed safety of public performance. This morning, Marcus was particularly focused because today's show was special in ways that most of the audience would never understand. The shopping center was hosting a Heroes Day celebration, honoring local first responders and military families from the nearby Luke Air Force Base and surrounding veteran communities. The management had specifically requested that the circus include patriotic elements in their performance, which meant Marcus would be performing his signature routine, a complex aerial sequence that he had privately named Operation Skyfall, in memory of a mission in Afghanistan that had required him to rappel from a helicopter into a compound surrounded by enemy forces. The setup process took exactly 47 minutes, the same amount of time it had taken his unit to prepare for a standard reconnaissance mission in hostile territory. Marcus checked each piece of equipment twice, tested every connection point with methodical precision, and verified that all safety protocols were in place according to both Circus industry standards and the military doctrine that still governed his approach to any potentially dangerous activity. In the military, attention to detail was the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. In the circus, it was the difference between a standing ovation and a trip to the emergency room, but the underlying principle remained exactly the same. As he worked, Marcus noticed the usual cast of characters that populated shopping centers on Saturday mornings across America. Teenagers clustered around the food court, texting and laughing with the carefree attitude of people who had never seen real danger. Parents struggled with strollers and shopping bags, focused on the mundane challenges of family life. Elderly couples walked their morning exercise routes through the climate-controlled corridors, moving with the careful deliberation of people who understood that their time was limited. Security guards in their crisp uniforms patrolled with the kind of casual alertness that suggested they were more concerned with shoplifters and minor disturbances than actual security threats. One of those security guards, a young man named Derek Thompson, who couldn't have been more than 25 years old and who had probably never been in a situation more dangerous than breaking up fights between teenagers, approached Marcus as he was testing the tension on his primary rigging line. "Hey, circus boy," Thompson said, with the kind of condescending smirk that Marcus had seen countless times over the past 18 months. "You need to make sure all this stuff is secure. We don't want you falling and hurting somebody important." Marcus looked up from his equipment check, his expression remaining neutral despite the irritation that flashed through his mind. In his previous life, disrespect from someone of Thompson's obvious inexperience would have been corrected immediately and definitively. But that was a different world, and Marcus had learned to control responses that were no longer appropriate for his current situation. "Everything's been tested and triple-checked according to industry safety standards," Marcus replied calmly. "Safety is always my top priority." "Right," Thompson replied, his tone suggesting he found the entire circus operation slightly ridiculous and possibly fraudulent. "Just remember, this isn't your regular audience of screaming kids and soccer moms. We've got some VIPs coming today for the Heroes Day thing. Real heroes, if you know what I mean. Military people, police officers, firefighters. People who actually matter. People who do real jobs that make a real difference." Marcus returned to his equipment without responding, though the irony of Thompson's words was almost overwhelming. The young security guard had no idea that he was lecturing someone who had spent 15 years conducting operations that had quite literally saved American lives, someone who had received commendations from generals and been personally thanked by senior government officials for service that could never be publicly acknowledged. Over the past 18 months, Marcus had heard variations of this conversation hundreds of times, from people who assumed that anyone working in a traveling circus had somehow failed at more conventional forms of employment and had ended up in the entertainment industry as a last resort. The assumption was always the same, that circus performers were essentially overgrown children who had never developed the maturity or skills necessary for serious adult responsibilities. What they didn't know was that Marcus had chosen this life deliberately, consciously, and with full awareness of what he was giving up. After 15 years of killing and destroying in service to his country, after years of viewing the world through the lens of threat assessment and tactical advantage, after countless nights lying awake, thinking about the enemies he had eliminated and the friends he had lost. Marcus had wanted to do something that brought joy instead of death. He had wanted to create moments of wonder and amazement instead of destruction and devastation. He had wanted to make children laugh instead of making their parents weep. The other performers began arriving around 10 o'clock, each bringing their own equipment and their own stories of how they had ended up in this particular corner of the entertainment industry. Carmen Vega, the ringmaster and circus owner, was a 60-year-old woman who had been in show business for 40 years and had seen everything that the entertainment world had to offer, both good and bad. She treated Marcus with the kind of professional respect that he appreciated. No unnecessary questions about his background, no attempts to dig into his personal history, just an acknowledgement that he was reliable, skilled, and committed to putting on the best show possible for every audience. Isabella Vega, Carmen's 32-year-old daughter, served as the circus's costume coordinator and assistant manager. She had been born into circus life, had grown up traveling from venue to venue, and possessed an intuitive understanding of how to manage the dozens of logistical details that kept a traveling show operational week after week, month after month. Isabella had been the first person to welcome Marcus when he had shown up 18 months ago, looking for work and carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a recommendation letter from a veterans organization. The other performers included Tommy Chen, a juggler and comic relief artist who had been with the circus for 5 years. Maria Santos, a contortionist whose flexibility seemed to defy the basic laws of physics. And David Park, a magician who specialized in close-up illusions that left audiences wondering how he had made objects appear and disappear seemingly at will. They were a tight-knit group who understood that circus life required absolute trust, precise timing, and the ability to perform under pressure while maintaining the illusion that everything was effortless and magical. What they didn't understand was that Marcus had learned those same skills in a very different context, where the stakes were measured in lives rather than applause, and where failure meant death rather than disappointment. The Heroes' Day celebration was scheduled to begin at noon, with a formal ceremony honoring local military families and first responders from throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. The circus performance would follow at 1 o'clock, providing family-friendly entertainment for the crowd that was expected to include several hundred people. Marcus had mixed feelings about performing for an audience that included active-duty military personnel and veterans. Part of him worried that someone might recognize him from his previous life or ask questions about his background that would be difficult to answer without revealing classified information. Part of him looked forward to performing for people who might actually understand and appreciate the level of physical conditioning, mental discipline, and technical precision that went into his aerial routines. At 11:30, the shopping center began filling with the Heroes' Day crowd, and Marcus watched from behind the temporary stage area as families arrived for the celebration. Many were wearing military unit T-shirts or first responder uniforms that identified them as members of the community being honored. Children ran excitedly between their parents, already anticipating the circus show they had been promised as part of the day's entertainment. Veterans of various ages moved through the crowd with the kind of quiet dignity and understated confidence that Marcus recognized immediately, the bearing of people who had served their country in various capacities. The formal ceremony began with a presentation of colors by the local American Legion post, followed by speeches from the mayor, the police chief, and a representative from Luke Air Force Base. Marcus listened from backstage, feeling the familiar mixture of pride and melancholy that always accompanied events honoring military service. He was proud of his own service and deeply respectful of the service of the men and women being honored. But he was also acutely aware of how different his life had become. At exactly 1 o'clock, Carmen took the microphone and began her opening introduction to the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, families and heroes, welcome to the spectacular circus. Today, we're honored to perform for the brave men and women who serve our community and our country in so many different ways. Our first act is our master of the air, our sky warrior, the man who defies gravity itself, Marcus Kane." Marcus entered the performance area to enthusiastic applause, waving to the crowd with practiced showmanship. He was wearing his signature blue and silver costume, complete with the flowing cape that would create dramatic visual effects during his aerial sequences. To the audience, he looked like exactly what he was supposed to be, a skilled entertainer, ready to amaze them with death-defying stunts and impossible aerial maneuvers. He began his routine with a series of ground-based acrobatic movements, designed to warm up his muscles while building anticipation for the aerial portion of the show. Marcus performed a sequence of backflips, handstands, and gymnastic routines that demonstrated his strength and flexibility while giving the audience a preview of the physical capabilities they were about to witness. The crowd responded enthusiastically, particularly the children, who gasped and applauded at each impressive movement. As he prepared to begin the aerial portion of his routine, Marcus scanned the crowd one final time, a habit left over from years of operations where situational awareness could literally mean the difference between life and death. The audience was relaxed and happy. Children were excited and engaged. Parents were smiling and taking photographs, and security guards were positioned at strategic points around the performance area. Everything appeared normal. Everything appeared safe. Everything suggested that this would be just another successful performance. Marcus grabbed the climbing rope and began his ascent to the rigging platform 30 feet above the crowd. As he climbed, he could hear the crowd below growing quiet with anticipation. This was the moment when the real show would begin, when he would transition from ground-based acrobatics to the aerial artistry that made circus performance truly spectacular. Reaching the platform, Marcus paused for a moment to acknowledge the crowd below, raising one hand in greeting while maintaining his grip on the rigging with the other. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic, with children pointing excitedly and adults craning their necks to get a better view of the man who seemed to be floating in space 30 feet above their heads. From this height, Marcus could see the entire shopping center spread out below him like a tactical map. The performance area where families were gathered, the food court where vendors were serving lunch to shoppers, the various store entrances that provided access to different sections of the complex, and the main corridors that connected everything together. What he saw next made his blood run cold and triggered every combat instinct that 15 years of special operations training had burned into his nervous system. 4 men in dark clothing were moving through the crowd with a purposefulness and coordination that had absolutely nothing to do with shopping, entertainment, or family activities. They were positioned at strategic points around the shopping center, one near the main entrance, one at the food court, one near the department store anchor, and one approaching the performance area where hundreds of families were gathered. Each man carried what appeared to be a large duffel bag, and they were all moving with coordinated precision that Marcus recognized immediately. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidental. This was planned, coordinated, and extremely dangerous. Marcus maintained his position on the platform, while his mind automatically shifted into threat assessment mode, running through protocols that he hadn't consciously used in 18 months, but that remained as sharp as if he had used them yesterday. 4 operatives, coordinated movement, strategic positioning, large bags that could contain weapons or explosives, timing that coincided with a large gathering of military families and first responders. The crowd below had no idea what was developing. They were focused on the circus performance, relaxed and vulnerable. One of the men near the main entrance had stopped moving and was beginning to pull something from his duffel bag. Even from 30 feet above, and at a distance of nearly 100 meters, Marcus could see that it was an assault rifle. The man was moving toward the crowd with deliberate intent, and Marcus realized that they had perhaps 30 seconds before whatever was about to happen would begin. In that moment of crystal clarity that comes in life-or-death situations, Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane, 75th Ranger Regiment, made a decision that circus performer Marcus Kane could never have made. He was going to act, and he was going to use every skill that 15 years of special operations training had given him to protect the innocent people below. The rigging system that he had spent 47 minutes carefully setting up that morning suddenly became tactical equipment rather than entertainment apparatus. The ropes and harnesses that were designed for aerial performance became tools for precision movement and rapid deployment. The aerial skills that he used to amaze children became combat techniques for approaching targets from unexpected angles. Marcus clipped his safety harness to a descent line and began moving toward the man approaching the performance area, using techniques that he had learned during urban warfare training and employed in actual combat situations. To the audience below, it might have looked like an unexpected addition to his routine. In reality, it was a tactical approach that would allow him to engage the threat from an angle the gunman wouldn't anticipate. As he descended, Marcus could see the man more clearly. Military-style haircut, tactical boots, body armor concealed under a loose jacket, weapon handling that suggested professional training. This wasn't random violence. This was organized, professional, and extremely dangerous. Marcus reached the bottom of his descent line just as the gunman was raising his weapon toward the crowd. Without hesitation, Marcus released his harness and dropped the final 8 feet, landing directly behind the gunman with silent precision. The gunman had no time to react. Marcus wrapped his left arm around the man's throat in a blood choke while simultaneously using his right hand to control the rifle, preventing it from being aimed at any civilians. Within seconds, the gunman was unconscious and his weapon was secured. To most of the audience, the entire sequence had happened too quickly to understand and looked like some kind of elaborate stunt. The applause actually increased as people assumed they were witnessing an unexpected segment of the show. But the other 3 gunmen had seen what happened to their colleague, and they were reacting. Marcus could hear shouts from across the shopping center as the remaining operatives abandoned their coordination and moved to immediate engagement. Gunfire erupted from the main entrance, sending shoppers screaming and running for cover. "Everybody down!" Marcus shouted, his voice carrying absolute authority. "This is not part of the show. Get down and stay down." The transformation was immediate and complete. Marcus Kane, the circus performer, ceased to exist, replaced by Staff Sergeant Kane, Special Operations, whose mission was to neutralize hostile forces and protect civilian lives. Marcus grabbed the rifle from the unconscious gunman and quickly checked its condition. Fully loaded, safety off, ready to fire. From the downed gunman's shoulder mic, he caught radio traffic, professional communications, coordinated targeting. This was a sophisticated attack. As Marcus moved toward the 3rd identified threat, he suddenly heard footsteps closing in behind him. Reflexively, he spun around, just in time to see a 5th attacker that had escaped the initial scan. The man was only a few meters away, a combat knife flashing in his hand, eyes filled with deadly determination. Marcus had no firearm at that moment, only circus equipment. When the knife came down, He sidestepped and, with perfect timing, flung the magnesium performance powder from his belt directly into the man's face. The cloud blinded the attacker, buying Marcus a split-second advantage. Marcus seized the moment. Drawing from his circus-honed agility, he caught the man's wrist, twisted sharply, and forced the blade free. The fight turned into a brutal close-quarters struggle in the center of the shopping mall. The assailant's movements were disciplined, too sharp, too deliberate. Marcus recognized the training instantly. Systema, or Krav Maga. This was no amateur. The attacker struck toward Marcus's throat. Marcus slipped sideways, countering with a crushing knee strike to the leg. The man staggered but kept fighting, lunging toward the fallen knife. Marcus vaulted over him in an acrobatic flip and kicked the blade out of reach, sending it skidding beneath a storefront display. The man roared with fury and hurled himself at Marcus. They crashed to the ground, grappling for dominance. Marcus attempted a chokehold, but the fighter broke free, proving his own level of training. In the scuffle, a second radio fell from the man's pocket. Marcus's heart sank. A backup communications channel. Proof there might be even more attackers. As they fought, Marcus spotted a small device clipped to the man's belt. A remote detonator. The stakes escalated instantly. This was no longer just a shooting. It was a bomb plot. Drawing on one of the Ranger's last resort combat techniques, Marcus allowed the man's momentum to carry forward. He relaxed for half a heartbeat, then used explosive precision to clamp down on the man's carotid artery. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15. Finally, the man went limp, unconscious. Marcus stripped him of weapons and secured the detonator. His circus costume was torn, streaked with blood and powder, but he had no time to dwell. There were still 2 active shooters. Securing the device, he refocused on the battlefield. The mission wasn't over. He logged the bomb risk, flagged the redundant comms, and recalibrated priorities. Contain, isolate, neutralize. "Isabella," Marcus called to the circus manager, who was crouched behind bleachers. "Call 911. At least 5 armed operatives in the building. 2 neutralized, 3 active. Possible additional based on a secondary radio. We need tactical response immediately." Using hand signals he hadn't employed in 18 months, Marcus communicated with veterans in the audience, organizing an impromptu team of former soldiers and police officers. "Watch the exits," Marcus instructed a former Marine. "Don't let anyone in. Don't let the shooters out. We contain this here and now." Marcus began moving toward the food court, where one of the remaining gunmen had taken position. Using the shopping center's architecture for cover, Marcus employed urban warfare techniques learned through years of training and refined through combat experience. The second gunman was positioned near the department store entrance, using shoppers as human shields. Marcus approached from an angle the gunman couldn't observe, moving through a service corridor. His circus training had given him intimate understanding of the building's layout, which areas provided cover, which routes offered concealment. Marcus needed to neutralize the threat without endangering civilians. The shopping center's decorative elements became an aerial highway that would allow him to approach the gunman from above, an angle that would be impossible to defend against. Marcus quickly rigged an improvised rappelling system using circus equipment, creating a descent line that would bring him directly behind the gunman's position. The setup took 90 seconds, longer than he preferred, but necessary for precision. Marcus began his descent using techniques that combined circus work with military procedures, moving in complete silence. The skills he had learned for entertaining children were being used to save their lives. The gunman never saw him coming. Marcus landed silently behind the counter, and neutralized the threat with the same efficiency he had demonstrated in training and combat. The gunman was unconscious within seconds, weapon secured. "It's okay," Marcus called to trapped civilians. "Threat neutralized. Move toward the exit. Stay low and together." One of the fathers, wearing a military unit t-shirt, approached Marcus with immediate recognition. "You're military." "Was," Marcus replied. "Long time ago." "Nobody moves like that unless current or recent. What unit?" 75th Rangers. You? 3rd Infantry Division. Iraq, 2 tours. Mike Patterson. Thanks for getting us out." Marcus shook his hand while listening to radio traffic from the remaining operatives. "Marcus Kane, we're not done yet. 2 more shooters." The remaining gunmen were trying to regroup near the main entrance. Marcus could hear them discussing escape routes in Arabic, their communications becoming increasingly urgent. From the food court, Marcus had a clear view of the entrance area. The 2 operatives had taken cover behind an information kiosk and decorative fountain, positions that gave them overlapping fields of fire, but limited their ability to observe threats from other directions. They had positioned themselves directly beneath the shopping center's skylight area, where Marcus's aerial rigging was still in place. Marcus accessed his equipment and repositioned himself above the entrance. The technique required precise timing. He would descend between both gunmen, engaging both targets simultaneously. Marcus began his descent at the exact moment when both gunmen were focused on the entrance, watching for police response. Neither man was looking up. Marcus engaged the first gunman at 15 feet, using a controlled tackle that neutralized the threat while maintaining trajectory toward the second target. The first gunman was unconscious before hitting the ground. The second gunman had reaction time, but couldn't effectively engage a target approaching from directly above at high speed. Marcus neutralized the final threat with the same efficiency. The shopping center was now clear of hostile forces. Marcus keyed the radio and broadcast on emergency frequency. "This is Marcus Kane. All 5 hostile operators neutralized. Building secure. Requesting medical response." Within minutes, the shopping center filled with police officers, paramedics, and FBI agents. Marcus found himself sitting on a bench, still in his circus costume, processing what had happened. He handed the captured remote detonator to the first bomb technician on scene and flagged the possibility of additional charges. An EOD sweep was initiated. Isabella approached with an expression combining relief, amazement, and confusion. "Marcus, what just happened? Who are you?" Marcus looked at his sequined costume, makeup smudged from combat. "I'm exactly who I said I was. A circus performer." "Circus performers don't neutralize armed terrorists." Marcus was quiet, watching FBI agents process the scene. Sometimes circus performers are other things, too. Over the next hours, Marcus found himself in debriefing sessions with federal agents trying to understand how a circus acrobat had prevented a major terrorist attack. The questions covered everything from his tactical training to current security clearance status. Marcus answered honestly, providing complete account of his military service. What he didn't explain was why he had chosen circus life. That conversation came later, with Department of Defense representatives. "Staff Sergeant Kane," said Colonel Jennifer Harrison, "your actions today prevented what could have been one of the deadliest domestic attacks in recent history. We estimate you saved 200 to 300 lives." Marcus still wore his circus costume. "I did what anyone with my training would have done." "There aren't many people with your training willing and able to act under those circumstances. The department would like to discuss bringing you back to active duty." "I was medically discharged. Chronic back injury, psychological stress." "Paperwork can be corrected. What happened today suggests your fitness was underestimated. Marcus looked toward the shopping center. Colonel, I chose circus life for a reason. Which was? For 15 years, I specialized in breaking things and killing people. I was good at it and served with honor. But when service ended, I wanted to do something that brought joy instead of death. And today? Today I protected innocent people. That's what I was trained to do. But that doesn't mean I want to go back to hunting terrorists. Colonel Harrison nodded. What if there was a way to do both? Maintain your current lifestyle while providing consultation when needed. Unofficial capacity? Very unofficial. Continue circus career, maintain cover identity, live the life you've chosen. But when situations arise requiring your skill set, you'd be available for assignments. The offer was intriguing. Marcus had found genuine satisfaction in circus life. But he also recognized his skills were unique and valuable. I have conditions. Name them. My circus colleagues don't know my background. That doesn't change. Military service remains classified. Circus identity remains genuine. Agreed. I won't take assignments conflicting with circus commitments. Kids expecting a show shouldn't be disappointed because of government business. Harrison smiled. That's what makes you perfect for this role. No one would suspect a circus performer prioritizing children's entertainment would conduct sensitive operations. Marcus extended his hand. Then we have an agreement. 3 months later, Marcus was performing at a county fair when his encrypted phone buzzed with a message. A hostage situation had developed at a Denver bank, and law enforcement requested consultation. Marcus finished his routine, told Carmen he had a family emergency, and drove to Denver. 2 hours later, he was providing tactical advice to a SWAT team. 6 hours after that, all hostages were safe, suspects in custody, and Marcus was driving back in time for the evening show. To his circus colleagues, he had dealt with family crisis. To the hostages, he was an anonymous consultant. To the Department of Defense, he was proof that the most effective operatives often looked nothing like operatives. Marcus Kane continued performing with spectacular circus, bringing wonder to children across the Southwest. He also continued serving his country in ways that would never appear in public records, using skills most people would never associate with a man in sequined costumes. Sometimes heroes really do wear the most unexpected disguises. Sometimes the person who can save your life is the same person you dismissed as just another entertainer. Marcus Kane's story reminds us that heroes often hide in plain sight, wearing costumes that disguise their true calling. When the world needed him most, the man they had dismissed as just another entertainer revealed the warrior he had always been. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Real Heroes Stories YouTube for more incredible tales of service, sacrifice, and second chances. Tell us in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And have you ever discovered that someone you underestimated was actually extraordinary? See you in the next video.